My $94,870 paid for my sister's dream wedding. Then she erased me from the guest list. So I made one move that shattered their fairy tale overnight. My name is Autumn. I'm 36 years old. I live in Seattle and work as a data engineer for a major healthcare company. I'm not married. I don't have kids. But I once spent nearly $100,000 on a wedding that wasn't mine. I grew up in a 2-story red brick house in Spokane, Washington, a small, quiet town where neighbors still came by to borrow a cup of sugar or a bag of coffee. There were 4 of us in the house. My dad, Mark, a longtime mechanic at the steel plant. My mom, Eileen, a part-time accountant for a local insurance company, and my younger sister, Chelsea, who from a young age had been labeled fragile. I wasn't. My Autumn name, my mom said, came from the October afternoon I was born with leaves covering the yard. She said I was quiet as a baby, easy to care for, rarely cried. And maybe that's when the role of the easy one rooted itself deep into my bones and stayed with me through adulthood. I learned how to make my own bottles, tie my own shoes, and walk myself to school earlier than any other kid in the neighborhood. Chelsea? She had a childhood wrapped in a delicate bubble everyone tried to protect, as if the gentlest wind might shatter her. Every time she fell, my mom would let go of my hand in the middle of the grocery store to rush over and pick her up. She's more sensitive. You understand, right, Autumn? Mom would say, like an apology that floated away on the wind, leaving me holding the heavy grocery bag alone. One time I asked why I had to do chores and Chelsea didn't. Mom was peeling apples. She paused and looked at me. Because you're stronger, you can handle it. Your sister, you know she's not like you. Then she turned away as if the answer was obvious, final, undeniable, and I could handle it. I always could. I was the first in the family to fill out the FAFSA form without help. I still remember that night, senior year, when the rest of my class went to prom, and I sat alone in our living room, carefully filling out each field. Household income, last year's taxes, student loans. My parents were at the hospital with Chelsea. She had a mild cold and couldn't sleep. I didn't blame them, but I remember the sting in my palms, sitting alone in that dim, quiet house, knowing I was used to being the only one who took care of me. I earned a full scholarship to UCLA. A moment that should have sparked celebration. But when I called to share the news, Mom just smiled softly and said, "Don't mention it in front of your sister. She's stressing about her math test. Don't make her feel worse." So, I swallowed my joy. At 17, I had already learned how to bend my happiness so it wouldn't poke anyone else. Chelsea, she went to a small community college nearby. When she got accepted into a graphic design program, our parents threw a backyard party with balloons and cake. Mom even bought her a brand new MacBook. I still remember what Dad said that day when I had flown in for a visit. Your sister's accomplishing things, too. She's not always fragile, you know. I smiled and pretended not to hear the word too. There was always something in my family that cast me in the role of the one who could take it, the one who knew how to manage. And maybe that would have been a compliment if it hadn't been used as an excuse for no one to ask whether I was tired. I once had a fever for 3 straight days in my dorm and no one called. If Chelsea had the sniffles, Mom would be on the next flight. But I was used to it, used to going to the doctor alone, prescribing my own meds, making congee in a rice cooker by my bed. Every time I called home to share a promotion or raise, Mom would gently say, "That's amazing. Could you help your sister with tuition this semester?" And I'd say yes. No one asked, "Are you doing okay?" Or "Have you had time to rest, Chelsea?" She had a boyfriend at 19, lived in a nice apartment downtown, all paid for. When they broke up, Mom told me to send her some money to help her get back on her feet. She once wanted to drop out of school because art classes were boring, and Mom agreed, saying, "As long as you're happy, I support you." Me? I once received a prestigious job offer in Singapore. When I told my parents, Mom frowned. "That far? Chelsea would be heartbroken if you weren't nearby." So, I declined. And no one ever brought it up again. I'm not writing this to complain. I'm writing to remember the layers, the quiet erosion of how a person becomes forgotten. They called me the strong one, as if that were praise. But sometimes I wonder if I stopped being strong, who would stay? I still remember that summer clearly. Seattle was drenched in drizzle for nearly 2 weeks, and I was finalizing paperwork to buy my first apartment. A small 2-bedroom with a balcony that looked out over Lake Union. Nothing extravagant, but a milestone I had quietly worked toward over nearly a decade, saving every penny, cutting back on expenses, skipping vacations to make it happen. Then a phone call at 2 a.m. changed everything. It was Mom. Her voice was hushed, but I could hear the panic underneath. Autumn, your dad had a minor stroke. He was admitted tonight. I'm here with him. Could you help out a little? I won't ask for much. I jumped out of bed, feet ice cold. Which hospital do I need to fly home? No need to fly. The doctors say it's not severe, just needs a few months off work to recover. But the bills, the medication, the groceries, you know how it is. I swallowed hard, eyes stinging, not from panic, but because I already knew what was coming. I'll transfer the money early next week, I said. Focus on taking care of Dad. She didn't thank me right away. She exhaled as if it was expected, like I, the eldest daughter trained to carry everything, was doing what I was supposed to. I closed my laptop. The home buying contract was still open in another tab, but the dream of that little apartment began to fade. A week later, I wired $3,000. Then again the next month, and again after that. I didn't complain, not once. I revised my budget, canceled my favorite yoga studio membership, scrapped plans to attend a San Diego industry conference, and postponed furniture shopping. Some things could wait. My dad's health couldn't. I didn't blame him. Dad was a man of few words. But I remember when I got into MIT, he just nodded and said, "Be careful on the East Coast. Winters are rough." But the look in his eyes, I've never forgotten that I accepted the sacrifice for my dad. But what I didn't expect was that during that time, Chelsea was rediscovering herself in Palm Springs. I found out through Instagram, a 15-second story. She was standing in front of a resort mirror in a white robe, captioned, "Taking a break to reset my soul. Self-care healing." I stared at that caption. Healing? Who exactly needed healing? The person living in a rented apartment, working 12-hour days, juggling hospital bills for our dad, or the one sipping kombucha by the pool? The next day, Mom called again. Chelsea's thinking of taking a semester off, moving to Palm Springs. The weather's better there. She's stressed from the breakup with Evan and the pressure from finals. She needs time to recover emotionally, you know. Mom added. There were moments I didn't think she'd make it. I was so worried. But she started reading again and doing meditation. There's a great place for rent, $1,900 a month, but they'll need to move fast. What do you mean? I asked, though I already knew. Chelsea needs a fresh start. Can you help her with the rent? Just the first 3 months. After that, if needed, I'll figure something out. 3 months? I bit my lip. I could have said no. I could have asked why can't Chelsea figure it out herself. But I knew the moment I said that, I'd be the unfeeling one. And as always, I chose the easier way for everyone else. All right, Mom, I'll handle it. After that call, I reopened my home purchase contract. I clicked pause. I sent Chelsea $6,000 in 3 separate transfers. No direct thank you, just more Instagram stories, brunch at an organic cafe, a night painting class, pictures of meditation books next to scented candles. Every time I looked, I wondered, was I helping her heal? Or was I feeding the illusion that someone would always be there to catch her every time she fell? One time, I gently asked, Chelsea, have you thought about getting a part-time job? There are a lot of cafes in Palm Springs looking for people. Silence on the other end, then a sharp laugh. Who do you think you are talking like that? I'm recovering. I need space. I'm the one who's hurting here. I froze. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm asking, have you thought about sharing a bit of the weight? Mom's voice cut in right on cue as if she always knew when to step in. Autumn, your sister's not like you. She's sensitive. Why are you being so cold? You know I trust you because you're strong, but you also need to learn compassion. I went quiet. I'd learned that any reaction could be labeled ungrateful. I hung up. That night, I made a cup of black tea, sat by the window, stared out at the damp street, and thought about something no one had ever asked me. Am I truly strong, or have I just been trying not to fall? Because if I fall, who's going to pick things up? A part of me began to crack, not from what I'd given, but from the truth that no one had ever asked if I had anything left to keep for myself. Chelsea got engaged on a Saturday afternoon. Mom called while I was at the office finishing a data report for a community healthcare project. Her voice was so excited. I thought something miraculous had happened with Dad, but no. Autumn, guess what? Your sister just got engaged. Brandon proposed yesterday at the vineyard. I smiled, keeping my voice even. Which vineyard, Mom? In Santa Barbara? It was beautiful. Brandon hired a professional photographer. He's so romantic and very successful. He's an anesthesiologist. Went to Duke. His family's in Colorado Springs, but he's looking to open a clinic in Denver. Mom never spoke that way about any man I'd dated. "I'll send a congratulatory gift," I said. She hesitated. "Well, there's something I was going to tell you later, but Brandon and Chelsea are planning to get married this fall. They want to book the Fairmont Hotel at Lake Tahoe. The groom's side will contribute too, but I knew exactly where that but was heading." Mom continued, like reading from an old script. "You've always had such great taste. If you could help out a little with the deposit, the dress, maybe the wedding photos in Napa, like those couples on Instagram." I looked up at the whiteboard in front of me, still filled with tasks: finalize heart rate algorithm, prep presentation, submit quarterly budget report. Meanwhile, somewhere in California, my sister had just received a diamond ring, and my mother was casually treating me like a backup bank account. "How much do you want me to contribute?" I asked bluntly. "I don't want to name a number, but, weddings once in a lifetime, and Chelsea has sacrificed so much." I didn't ask what Chelsea had sacrificed. I only said yes. In the following 3 months, I transferred a total of $32,000 for the hotel deposit, plane tickets for the pre-wedding photo shoot in Napa Valley, and a payment for the custom wedding dress shipped from Paris. Chelsea sent me a picture of the dress, along with the message. "It's the one. I can feel it. Thank you for making this possible. You don't have to get me anything else." I reread the sentence. "You don't have to get me anything else?" As if it were a relief, as if I'd just been let off the hook for part of the responsibility. Every time I transferred money, I told myself, maybe this is the last time. But in the 4th month, Mom called. "Chelsea's really stressed about choosing the flower colors. Maybe you could call and help her. She listens to you." I called. Chelsea was sitting at a nail salon. "I seriously don't know what color to pick, ivory or soft white. I'm scared it'll look washed out in the photos." I was standing in a hospital hallway, laptop in hand. I said softly, "Pick the one that makes you feel at peace." "Peaceful?" She laughed. "You always talk like some kind of monk." I smiled, because I've had to learn how to soothe myself. Chelsea didn't get it or didn't care. By month 6, the total amount I'd spent crossed $90,000. I knew because I kept a separate Google sheet. Each line item: wedding invitations, imported Ecuadorian flowers, custom candles with the couple's names, a jazz band from New Orleans because Brandon hates DJs. I hadn't met Brandon many times, 3 to be exact. He was always polite, but his eyes never lingered on me for more than 5 seconds. I could feel it clearly. I wasn't part of the world he found worth remembering. And then one Wednesday afternoon, I got an email from the wedding planner. Subject line: Update guest list adjustment. I opened the attached PDF, scrolled to the section Family of the bride. My name wasn't there. I thought it was a mistake, but when I called my mom, she went silent for a few seconds before sighing. "Autumn, Chelsea, she thinks you're really busy." And Fiona, Brandon's mother, also suggested keeping the ceremony peaceful. No tension. "Everyone knows you tend to be deep and reflective." I cut her off. "Mom, I paid for everything." She didn't deny it. She said, "You're the strong one. You understand?" I hung up. That same evening, Chelsea sent me a long message. The gist: "I need that day to be mine. I know you've done a lot for me, but if your presence makes anyone uncomfortable, I'm sorry. I'll make it up to you another way. Pick it up." She used the phrase like I was an unsatisfied investor. I sat alone in my rented apartment, not the one I planned to buy last year. On the table were the electric bill and a mentor group schedule I'd recently signed up for. I opened the Google sheet again, the final number, $94,870. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel regret over the money. I felt like someone who'd financed the building of a stage only to be barred from the theater, because I didn't fit the color scheme. That feeling didn't have a name, but it was cold and deep, like underground water. I couldn't sleep that night. It felt like I had just stepped out of a long dream, one where I carried everything but never existed in anyone's eyes. I brewed coffee at 2 a.m. Outside the window, Seattle was wrapped in misty rain. Under the soft yellow glow from the kitchen, I sat down and opened my laptop. I typed into the email search bar. Up came Somerset Grand Venue, the Bloomyard Florals, Boston Swing Band, Coastal Flavors Catering, Lucent Candles Custom Gifts. I opened the folder of PDF contracts. On each contract there was one signature. Mine, not Chelsea's, not my mother's, not Fiona's, the polished future mother-in-law. The responsibility lay with me. They needed someone's credit card and they knew I was always reliable. I clicked into an email from Kimberly, the event coordinator at Somerset Grand. Subject, rehearsal dinner confirmation. I didn't hit reply. I opened the contract, scrolled down to the cancellation terms. Clause 14.2. Partial refund of 30% if no less than 72 hours prior to the event. The event was 5 days away. I still had time. I took a deep breath. No more hesitation, no more needing anyone's approval. I typed, Kimberly, I'm the signatory for the wedding of Chelsea Whitmore and Brandon Miller at Somerset Grand. I am formally requesting contract cancellation effective immediately in accordance with Clause 14.2. Please confirm the refund processing timeline. Thank you, Autumn Rowan. We're one step, but I wasn't stopping there. I called Coastal Flavors, the catering company. Michael, the manager I'd discussed seafood menus and cocktail pairings with, picked up after 3 rings. Autumn, something wrong? I just got the final timeline from the planner yesterday. I got straight to the point. Michael, I am the one who signed the contract. I'm canceling. If the bride and groom wish to continue, they'll have to handle it directly with you. I'm no longer financially responsible for any of it. He paused, then sighed. I understand. I've seen worse happen before weddings. I'll send you the cancellation confirmation and penalty invoice by tomorrow morning. I thanked him and hung up. Next, I called the Blue Mared, the flower importer. After a few verification steps, a staff member named Elena said, "You're the signator. Then we'll have to cancel unless we receive confirmation from the bride's side. We'll process a partial refund since the flowers haven't been ordered yet." I moved on to the Boston Swing Band, Brandon's favorite since college. The rep, raspy voice, probably around my dad's age, listened and then said quietly, "I don't get involved in family drama, Miss Rowan, but you're the signer. You've got the authority." I worked like I was dismantling a house I'd built myself. Brick by brick, 8 hours, 23 emails, 5 Zoom calls, 1 cup of spiced apple tea, 1 reheated bowl of soup. Then back to the screen. I contacted the invitation printer, the vintage car rental company, the slideshow producer, even the candle booth printing the couple's names canceled. Some vendors asked why. I simply said, the sponsor has withdrawn, no further explanation. By nearly 1 a.m., I tallied the spreadsheet. Total spent $94,870. Recovered $44,780. Almost half. The rest. I considered it tuition. Expensive, but worth it. Not to learn how to say no, but to learn that the right to decide, even if late, was still a right I could give myself. 3 days after I canceled every wedding contract, the phone started ringing more than usual. First missed calls from Mom, then a text from my aunt in Portland. "Autumn, people are saying you're not okay. Should I fly to Seattle and stay with you?" I sat quietly in my office, watching that message flash and fade like a faint warning sign. Not long after, a college friend, Karen, messaged me on Facebook. "Hey, I heard your sister's wedding got called off because you had a breakdown. Are you all right? Sending love." A breakdown? I set the phone down, my palm suddenly cold. An hour later, I received an email from the shared vendor folder where I had requested all wedding files be deleted. One of the reps from the photo booth rental company had written, "We understand the sensitive nature of your family situation and hope Miss Autumn recovers emotionally soon. Thank you for your cooperation to recover emotionally." I stared at the screen like it had just slapped me across the face. That's when I knew exactly what was happening. My mother had called Grandma Ethel and told her the story, her version of it, and from there it spread the way things always do in small towns, soaked in morality, pity, and a hint of smug satisfaction. In that version of the story, I was no longer the woman who had written every contract and managed every line item. I was the older sister, overwhelmed by work, struggling with her emotions, the one who refused to attend the wedding because of unresolved emotional trauma, the fragile Autumn who needed rest. I refrained from lashing out, screaming, or confronting anyone. I chose to respond with facts, which has always been my strength. I opened my laptop and drafted an email. Subject: official clarification regarding wedding cancellation. To all vendors, this is Autumn Rowan, the individual who signed and financed the majority of the wedding contracts for Miss Chelsea Whitmore and Mr. Brandon Miller. I would like to formally confirm that due to the loss of my rights and involvement in the planning process, I exercised my legal authority to terminate the contracts under clearly defined terms. This cancellation was not the result of any emotional instability as implied or rumored by certain parties. I was and remain fully sound in mind and legally competent at the time of all related decisions. If you have received any inaccurate statements about me from family or affiliates, I encourage you to refer to our records and communications for verification. Respectfully, Autumn Rowan. I sent it to every vendor, the wedding planner, and my attorney, Rick Jensen, an old friend from MIT, now practicing in Cambridge. 5 minutes later, Rick called. Autumn, I read your email. Well executed. Do you want me to respond publicly or stay in the background? I don't need someone to speak for me, I said. I need them to know I'm not staying silent anymore. Rick exhaled softly. Understood. That afternoon, I received a reply from Somerset Grand. Thank you for the clarification. We fully confirm all transactions and cancellation rights belong to you. No psychological notes were ever logged in our system. We will not make any assumptions outside policy. Another email came from Blue Mared Florals. We regret the circulation of false information. Thank you for your continued professionalism throughout the planning process. And from Coastal Flavors, Adam, we fully respect your decision. The rumors don't change the fact that you were one of the most organized and thoughtful clients we've worked with. That evening, my mother called 3 times. I didn't pick up. On the 4th try, I answered. Autumn, do you need me to fly out? I'm really worried about you. Her voice was soft, but I had learned to recognize it. That wasn't real concern. It was the kind of worry people express when others start asking questions they no longer have good answers for. I'm fine, I said flatly. Then why are you making everything such a mess? I didn't mess anything up. I simply withdrew what I paid for, and I'm no longer playing a supporting role in a story I've been written out of. My mother sighed. Autumn, you're overthinking this. You're making a big deal out of nothing. I let out a cold laugh. Funny how it's nothing. Yet, you had to tell the whole family I was mentally unstable. Silence. Then she said, slow and stiff, I never said that. I only said you were going through a difficult time. Fiona? Brandon's mother asked. And I had to explain something to keep the peace, though you chose to let people believe I wasn't well. Don't say it like that. Everyone just wanted the wedding to go smoothly. I refuse to be labeled fine anymore, and a smooth wedding at the cost of my dignity is the last thing I want. She started to say something, but I hung up. I don't know what made me open that old email folder later that night. Maybe I was cleaning up my laptop. Maybe I was looking for the floral contract to forward to Rick for archiving. Or maybe some small part of me still hoped this had all been a misunderstanding, that they hadn't deliberately pushed me out. The folder labeled wedding vendors was still there. I scrolled through dozens of threads with titles like cake flavor confirmation, revised seating chart, bridal suite upgrade. Then I stopped at an email with a bland subject line, internal notes, final planning discussion. The sender was Kelly Freeman, the event manager my mom had hired. It had been sent in a group email thread I was somehow still copied on. I opened it. No expectations, just faint curiosity, and there it was. My mom's message to Kelly sent over a month ago, nestled in the middle of the chain. It read, Kelly, for the budget discussions and floral decisions, just coordinate with me and Chelsea. Keep Autumn out of this part. She's too pragmatic. She'll question every detail and ruin the tone we're trying to set. I read it 3 times, and suddenly all the little fractures inside me clicked into place, forming a complete truth. I was never meant to be part of this joy. I was only meant to fund it. I leaned back in my chair, stared at the screen, not in shock. I was too tired for shock, but for the first time I saw clearly what they thought of me when I wasn't in the room. I was too practical, the one who would ruin the mood, the person who had to be excluded from the decisions despite paying for them. An hour later, I got a message from Rick, my lawyer. Autumn. I finished reviewing the financial verification packet Brandon submitted to the bank. There's something you should know. I called him immediately. Rick's voice was low, deliberate. Brandon Miller isn't nearly as wealthy as they claimed. His savings account is under $5,000. His credit card was maxed out twice in the past 8 months. And he has an outstanding personal loan, $37,000 from a betting app. I gripped my phone. Gambling seems that way. I can't say for certain he's addicted, but given the volume of transactions from platforms like Draft Pro and Vegas Line and his credit history, I'd say it's concerning. I stayed silent, Rick added, as if reading my thoughts. You're not required to inform anyone, but if you want to protect yourself, I'd recommend keeping a record of this information, especially if you're planning to cut financial ties completely. I thanked him, then hung up. Everything inside me felt frozen. Brandon, the so-called ideal fiancé anesthesiologist from Duke, owns his own clinic, was a facade. And Chelsea, she chose him. Not because of some grand romance, but because my family needed a prestigious ticket into a different class. I remembered the first evening my mother mentioned the wedding, how she emphasized that Brandon went to Duke, that his family has inherited real estate in Colorado, and that Fiona used to be the head of the state charity board. I remembered the look in Chelsea's eyes when she said, "I want my wedding to be really special. You get it, right? I need to show them I'm worth it, to show them not to live truthfully, but to prove her value through the wedding, the dress, the venue, and someone else's wallet." I downloaded all vendor emails and saved a backup folder labeled Legal Backups. Outside, it was still raining. That fine, persistent Seattle rain, like the kind of lies that cling to your mind long after they're spoken. I arrived in Denver on an early autumn afternoon for the company's annual business trip. It was a national conference on public health data, an event I'd attended every year. The guests came from everywhere: engineers, doctors, investors, early-stage health startups, a space that balanced technical focus and enough social polish for people to sip wine and talk about innovation with bright eyes. I didn't expect to see Brandon there. Honestly, I had hoped I'd never have to see him again. That evening, the event hosted an open-air networking session on the Hyatt rooftop. Denver's air was crisp. I stood near the bar holding a glass of sparkling water, listening to a group of young founders discussing using AI to monitor elderly patients, and then I heard the voice. I didn't need to turn to know who it was. Autumn? I turned. Brandon stood about 3 steps away. The soft yellow lights above cast a pale hue across his face. His collar was open, his cravat wrinkled, and the whiskey glass in his hand was nearly empty. He didn't look like a polished anesthesiologist at all. He smirked. "Small world, huh? Where's your sister?" Not tagging along. "No," I replied. "I'm here for work." Brandon raised the glass to his lips, drained it, his eyes slightly glassy. "You're always working." I didn't respond. I turned slightly to leave, but he stepped closer, voice suddenly lower. Rough. "You think you're some kind of saint, don't you? Saving your whole family from falling apart. Footing the bill for the wedding. Playing the noble big sister." "I don't think anything. I just did what I thought was right. And then I stopped when I realized I was being used." Brandon laughed, a warped sound, almost pained. "Used? Are you serious? You're a bank, a walking gold card. Everyone in that house knows it. You think they care about you for who you are." I stayed still. His words weren't surprising, but hearing them said out loud from someone on the inside, it felt like a slap. Brandon stepped closer. His breath reeked of alcohol. "You're not the main character, Autumn. You're a prop, a justification so everything looks good from the outside. Pay for a pretty wedding, and the family gets to call itself loving. But who gives a damn what you think?" I slid my hand into my coat pocket, pulled out my phone, pressed record, raised the screen to chest level. "Thanks for confirming," I said calmly. "I'm recording this." Brandon froze. For a second, I saw the color drain from his face. Then it flushed red with anger. Are you crazy?" "No, I'm clearer than I've ever been." He looked around, then stepped back. The whiskey glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the tiled floor. People nearby turned to look. A hotel staff member rushed over, crouching to pick up the pieces. I didn't take my eyes off Brandon. "You think you control the narrative? You think one recording changes anything? I don't need it to change anything. I just need proof. So, next time someone asks why I walked away, I won't need to explain. I'll just press play." Brandon sneered, no longer smirking. His eyes looked exposed, like someone stripped of their costume, the background jazz no longer covering the red in his account balance. "Chelsea will hate you forever," he said. "Good," I replied. "Because if she ever loved me but still erased me from her life to fit some picture, then that's not love I need." I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard him mutter something, then the sound of retreating footsteps. I didn't attend Chelsea's wedding. That didn't need to be said anymore. The ceremony took place on a gloomy Saturday at the end of September. I knew because one of my mom's old friends, Judith, who still preferred email over social media, sent me a brief message. "You didn't come? People say you've disowned the family." Anyway, the bride looked a bit sad. Chelsea did have her wedding, but not at Somerset Grand. There was no seated candlelit dinner, no live jazz band like she had dreamed. The venue was changed to a public hall in the suburbs of Littleton, where Brandon's family knew the manager and got it nearly free. No Ecuadorian roses, no swing band from New Orleans, just pre-recorded music from a Bluetooth speaker in the corner, and a few of Fiona's friends taking turns reading toasts. The dress, the limited edition design from Paris I had wired $9,800 for, never appeared. Chelsea wore a white gown repurposed from her engagement party. A former co-worker of mine who happened to be related to Brandon also attended. She messaged me on LinkedIn. "I don't know what went down between you and your sister, but the wedding felt cold. No flowers, no vibe. The bride kept looking around like she was waiting for someone who never showed." I sat in a cafe near my home in Seattle reading that message. Outside, the rain fell in fine, quiet threads. Seattle rain. I didn't feel smug. I didn't feel satisfied that my absence had left a space. The following week, I signed up for therapy. Dr. Marlene Yates's office was on the 5th floor of an old brick building near Queen Anne with tall windows that overlooked the hill. The room smelled faintly of ginger tea and ticked with the steady sound of a small wall clock. During the first session, I barely said a word for 10 minutes. Marlene didn't rush me. She remained seated, nodding gently, waiting for me to find my breath again. "What brings you here?" she asked. "Because I don't want to live a life where every feeling has to pass through the filter of being the responsible older sister, a role with no exit." I let out a soft laugh. "I used to think I played it well. And now you've decided to stop acting. I want to learn how to live as myself, not as the person my family needs when they're falling apart." After a few sessions, I began rewriting my personal rules, something I had never allowed myself to have before. I have the right to say no without explanation. I am not a bank account named obligation. I am not responsible for someone else's comfort when they're stomping on my boundaries. I don't need permission to walk away from a house that no longer feels like home. I changed my phone number. No announcements, no goodbye texts, just a short email to the phone company. Request for a new number. No call forwarding allowed. My mother called 13 times over the old number in the first 2 weeks, then silence. I joined a mentorship group for women in tech, a program supporting female engineers, coders, and managers redefining their roles in large companies. We met every Wednesday in a small office on the 6th floor overlooking Lake Union. We didn't talk much about trauma. We talked about promotions, the fear of being labeled difficult for speaking directly, and how to make requests without needing to say sorry first. And one evening, I shared that I once spent nearly $100,000 on my sister's wedding, only to be erased from the guest list. A woman named Janelle, the group leader, sat across from me. She set her pen down and said calmly, "That wasn't a failure. That was tuition. Expensive, but very clear." I never forgot that line. That night, I went home and opened my closet. I folded the old things Chelsea had given me, a beige wool scarf, a photo frame with a sisterhood quote, a notebook I'd never used. I changed my bed sheets, hung up new indigo curtains, bought 3 novels that had sat on my wish list for years, books I kept telling myself I'd get later. I didn't change my life. I just began living it differently. I received a letter on a Tuesday morning in February. Seattle was misty and damp as usual. I had just poured my first cup of coffee when I heard a soft knock on the mailbox slot down the hall, a cream-colored envelope, no return address with only one line on the front, for Autumn. I brought it into the kitchen, hands still warm from holding my coffee mug, and set it on the table. My heartbeat slowed. I knew that handwriting, slightly slanted, each curve steady. Chelsea always had beautiful penmanship. Even her sticky notes looked like calligraphy. I opened it. One folded sheet of plain paper. I have no excuse. I'm not writing to be forgiven. This is the first time I feel clear enough to look back and brave enough to name what I've lost. I lost Brandon after the wedding. He didn't leave because of money or love. He left because I had no one left to ask, no more wallets to open gift boxes, and no sister quietly cleaning up the mess. I lost my reputation. I lost friends. But the deepest loss was you. I lived in the illusion that you would always be there. No matter what I did, no matter how many wrong choices I made, I thought love was automatic, that it didn't need tending or protecting. I was wrong, and painfully I only realized it when no one answered my messages anymore. If you can spare one morning for coffee, neither to reconcile nor to fix, but simply to listen, I'll wait. Even if your answer is silence, Chelsea. I sat for a long time, not to decide whether I'd go, but to ask myself, what would I be walking into? 3 days later, I chose a small cafe in the Central District. A place I'd visited a few times on tired days, quiet with gray wood walls, soft yellow lights, and a corner table that overlooked a row of leafless trees beginning to bud green. I arrived 10 minutes early. When Chelsea walked in, I was already seated with a black espresso. She wore a faded gray sweater, old jeans, her hair tied low, no makeup. Her face showed the kind of tiredness you no longer try to hide. For the first time in years, my sister didn't show up as a curated version of herself. She hesitated, then walked over, sat down. "Thank you for coming." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "Brandon left 3 weeks after the wedding," she began. "Actually, he was never really there. He had a separate apartment I didn't know about. His parents paid the rent and the cash. He took it from me. I didn't ask how much." Chelsea kept going, her voice unsteady. "The day I found my account empty, I called Mom. She said, 'You made your choice. Deal with it.' I called again. She didn't pick up. I started working at a cafe near campus." Chelsea continued. "I applied to restart school sociology at UMass Boston. I don't know if I can afford it, but I want to try." Chelsea looked at me, her eyes red but dry. "You don't have to believe me right away. I just want you to know I didn't write to get pity. I just didn't want the last memory of us to be you erased from your own family story." I was quiet for a while, then I spoke slowly. "If my little sister is truly standing on her own for the first time without needing to be carried, I'll stand beside her, not to hold her up, but to witness it." We remained there for 10 more minutes. Not much was said. When we stood, Chelsea didn't ask for a hug. I didn't offer my hand. We looked at each other. Two people setting down old luggage, choosing to walk forward with empty hands. Only then did I see my sister not as a character in someone else's story. She was simply there, not to be saved, but to begin. It was the first time in years I left a meeting with Chelsea without the weight of responsibility or the pull to fix something. I didn't forgive her that day. I didn't forget what had happened. But I knew this time I wasn't being dragged. I was walking beside her, and that was enough to start over if both of us truly wanted it. My story may not be like anyone else's, but maybe somewhere out there, you've stood in a similar place, always strong, always carrying the weight, always misunderstood as kind when what they really meant was obligated,